to talk about installation of the VFD Spindle Kit for the YoraHome Cross River. When you order the VFD Spindle Kit, we're going to be replacing our stock 500 watt spindle here with a much more powerful, versatile spindle. So when you order your VFD Spindle Kit, you're going to get a handful of items here. You're going to get the new 1.5 or 2.2 kilowatt spindle. This is a 2400 RPM spindle, runs on 110 volts at up to 400 hertz. That's our variable frequency drive assembly. You're also going to get a VFD controller. Most of these functions you will never have to adjust. Your big one's going to be your start, stop, and your speed control. On the back you have your power and your output to the VFD drive. You'll also get a cable to connect the VFD drive to the spindle. You will get 2 pieces of flexible tubing. This is for the water cooling on the spindle. You will also get a submersible water pump that will provide cooling to the spindle. You will get both an 1/8 inch and a 1/4 inch collet for the spindle. These will be packed in the box as well. So these are standard ER11 collets. And you will get a pair of wrenches for tightening and loosening your collet. There will be 3 things that you will not get with your kit. These will be need to be provided by you. You will need a reservoir of some sort. I used a handy dandy 5-gallon bucket, compliments of Home Depot. You need a lid for said bucket to keep dirt and grit out of it. I've already drilled a hole in this to allow for the hoses and cord to pass through. And you're going to need distilled water. We want to use distilled water or drinking water because we don't want the mineral content that's present in most tap water to build up inside the passages of the motor itself. So again, you will have to supply those yourself. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to remove our 500 watt spindle and the mounting bracket from our cross river. So this is done simply by loosening the 4 bolts. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect my wiring and just tuck that up here out of the way because we don't need that. And I'm going to go ahead and remove spindle and bracket all in one piece. You will now need the 80 millimeter mounting bracket that was supplied with your cross river. And you'll have mounting screws that were also with your cross river. And you'll notice in the Z-axis plate, there's 4 holes here that are just a little bit to the outside of the plate. That's where our 80 millimeter spindle holder will mount. I'm going to go ahead and get all these started so I can then run them in a little bit faster. This is the same mount you would use if you were wanting to run the Makita or DeWalt router using the supplied spacers as well. screws I have here are a little bit longer, so it might take a little bit of extra minute here to run them in. We want to make sure that they are all seated. Once they're all in and snug, just give them a good extra quarter turn. Make sure that we're good and tight on the plate. And our motor mount is now in place. I'm going to go ahead and actually mount the spindle motor on there. What I want to make sure of first is when the spindle motor is shipped, these two fittings are on here and they have black plastic or rubber plugs on them. So I'm going to go ahead and remove those and actually pull the plugs out so you have just the open connections there. I'm not going to put the fittings back on because we need to run them over the hose first. So I'm going to go ahead and get my spindle motor into my holder. I'm not going to set the height final yet. Just got the thumb screw to hold our motor in place. So now we want to go ahead and set up our cooling lines and return lines. So what you want to do is we're going to take our tubing and our fitting. We want to place this fitting onto the tubing first. We're then going to place our tubing on there. We're going to work it down until it sits flat against there. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit on that to show you a little more detail. So you can see there that that tubing is seated right against there. And then you just run your fitting down over that by hand and go ahead and get it started. Let me zoom back out now. We're going to do the same with both of our pieces of tubing. It is not critical which one is the inlet, which one is the outlet. So again, take my fitting, place it over the tubing, work my tubing down onto the fitting. Don't be surprised if you slip like that. Then we're going to use our 14mm wrench to tighten these fittings down. These don't need to be gorilla tight. We want them tight so that we don't get a leak, but you don't want to damage them. There's no other compression fitting or anything in here. It is the mechanism of the fitting that holds the tubing tight. Now some people may wish to set this part up before they mount the spindle on your machine. You are certainly welcome to do that. You can do a leak check that way. I'm pretty confident that we're going to have a nice tight seal here, so I'm not going to be too worried about that. So now I have our supply and return lines. What I'm going to do, stretch them out. I'm going to run them through the hole in my bucket lid. So that way I know I've got plenty of room, and I don't forget about it and have to do it later, because once you connect these hoses to the fittings, they don't want to come back off very easily. On one of the hoses, we're going to go ahead and attach it to the fitting on top of our submersible pump. Like so. Don't necessarily have to have it on all the barbs. It's entirely up to you. We're not putting enough pressure on there to really have that be a major concern. I'm going to stretch out my power cord for my pump and also make sure that it goes through my lid, obviously in the opposite direction. We're going to want to make sure our return line drops back into the bucket as well. Tilt that just a touch for you. Now the pump itself does have suction cups on the base, so you can set the pump in your bucket, press down, it's going to stay put. Little filter cover on the back, I did pop loose there inadvertently. So now we're going to go ahead and make sure everything's routed up. Keep your lid on there, that keeps most everything out of there. I'm going to put the water in there in just a moment here. Next thing we're going to do is hook up our cable. Two different ends. One goes to the motor, one goes to the controller. It is an indexed fitting, so it can only go in one way. There we go. Got the lock ring that holds it in place. You want to route everything out of the way so that you keep it clear of any moving parts on your machine. Similar indexed fitting for the rear of the controller. Lock ring to hold it in place. I'm going to go ahead and just set this right here for ease of use right now. I'm going to grab my power cord for that. So we can get it plugged in as soon as I figure out exactly where I set my power cord. There we go. Set it on another machine, right where I knew I'd remember it and then forgot about it. I'm going to go ahead and plug this in so you can see what kind of display we're going to get here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tip this up so that you can see it a little bit better. And move my camera a little bit here. And we'll zoom in on it. You may not see the display clearly because it does flicker a little bit when it is adjusting speed. So I'm going to go ahead and get it turned on. And we'll see we're sitting here flashing. The frame rate, the stop button is lit solid. It just looks flickering in the camera, unfortunately. So we can hit our run button and then we can adjust our frequency And we can see where our motor starts turning. And once we reach our 400 Hertz, we're at the full 24,000 RPM. Go ahead and adjust it back down. It does take a little bit of time for it to coast down. And we can hit our stop button. That stops everything. So let me go ahead and get some water in my tank here. Zoom back out so you can see this. I'm using about 3 gallons of water. That's going to have my bucket mostly full. You want to make sure that the pump is fully submerged before you turn the power on. You don't want to run that pump dry. Now, if your machine is not going to be located in an environment where you have climate control, you want to make sure you keep this water from freezing. You can do that a couple of ways. You can add antifreeze to it. What I would suggest if you do so is go to your local auto parts store, Walmart, whatever the case may be, and you want to look for RV antifreeze. It'll be a pink substance. The advantage to it is if you do have a spill, it's not toxic to animals. They're not going to want to drink it because it's going to taste kind of nasty, but it won't kill them in the event that they do drink it. So once we've got our water reservoir filled up, as I noted, I got 3 gallons of water in here. That should be plenty. We want to make sure that our return line is placed in the bucket so we don't spray water everywhere. And I'm going to go ahead and plug my water pump in. And I've already got water flowing through my whole system. So this is a simple closed loop. Double check here for leaks. I've got no leaks. You'll always want to make sure you have the water running before you put a heavy load onto this spindle motor. Check your return line, make sure you're getting water back. I am. So now your VFD drive is ready to start carving. You're no longer relying on the water or air cooling. You got the water cooling, so you can put a pretty hefty load on our spindle. We will have a video out here shortly. We have the bracketry to allow for this same mount to be placed on the silverback. I just got to grab the brackets and we'll get that video put together for you as well. So hopefully this will help you get your VFD drive installed and up and running. You can see it's a pretty quick process. If you have any questions whatsoever, always can be reached at support@yorahome.com. Thank you and enjoy.
Jungle.